Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 309 for the 2nd of Tishrei in a leap year. So it's the second day of Rosh Hashanah, so I am pre-recording this episode. If you're listening to this before Rosh Hashanah, then I wish you a very happy and sweet new year, K'tiva v'chatima tova. And if you're listening to this after Rosh Hashanah, then I wish you a Gmar chatima tova. And just again, a great and sweet new year and an easy fast for Tzom Gedalia and for Yom Kippur as well. So a question we're going to start off today's episode with is a very famous question that you may have heard before, namely, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So it's not so simple, right? At first glance, you want to say the chicken, right? Because eggs only come from chickens. But where do chickens come from? Chickens come from eggs, right? So what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's this like very famous paradoxical question. And the reason why I bring this up is because today we're going to be talking about causality, and we're going to be talking about how causality differs from ex nihilo, from the creation of something from nothing. So causality, where there's this cause and effect relationship between two things, then we see that there's a connection between the two things. And often you can actually study the effect. And if you study the effect enough, you can figure out its cause. And sometimes the cause and effect, like in the example of the chicken and the egg, can actually get confusing. And it can be like, which one is the cause? Which one's the effect? We can think about this in human terms, in terms of when you're having an argument with somebody and people are like, you started it. It's like, what started it? And it's like, you keep going back further and further enough. And there is definitely, there's this like causal chain, and you can really tell from the nature of the argument, if you study it enough, what is causing it. But on the other hand, there is the cause and the effect are so intertwined, so interconnected, that it's really difficult to separate the two. So why are we bringing this up? Because this is to contrast how the creation of something from nothing happens, how the creation of our physical world happens. Because our physical world is really unique in the scheme of creation, because the other spiritual worlds that exist, they all are created in this cause-effect kind of way. There's a causal relationship between the worlds. And with this, and we've spoken about this previously, with this causality that's happening in the spiritual realms, this lends them, one of the positive things about this is it lends them to have a deep and conscious recognition of their creator, of God. It makes them realize where they come from. Versus when it comes to us here in this physical world, even for the most religious people, even for, the biggest scholars and very religious kind of people, it's like they may learn about God. We may learn about God in this intellectual way, and we may come to a very deep sense of bitachon, of faith, and even of knowing God on a certain level. We're not experiencing God the way that the angels are, or the way that the souls are in different realms, because we can't, because we are trapped here in our physical bodies. And the physical bodies that we live in, the physical world that we live in, it's like the cause, and it's not a causality thing. It's so removed from its source. It's so removed from God who created us that it doesn't have this causal relationship. There was a leap. There was this thing where we were created out of nothingness. And what do we mean out of nothingness? Is that when we say nothing, it's like sort of like a euphemism for saying out of something that we just cannot comprehend. We don't know what this thing is. It's unlike any other effect in the world, where if you look at the effect and you can study it enough, you can understand its cause. That's not the case in the world. Even though we've said, that you can study the human body, you can study the world, and through that, you can come to understand God. You can understand God to a certain extent, but not in this causality way. It's not going to ever lead you to the cause in the same way because of this creation ex nihilo, this creation something from nothing, because we're so different than our cause. So the question that comes up, and this is the question that we're going to be addressing today, is how does this happen? How is this possible? Because we have learned, if you've been studying this, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, that nothing exists apart from God, right? And that everything truly is nullified to God. God is the true cause of everything. The Rambam calls God the primal cause of everything, the first cause. So how is it that we can have this type of existence where it seems as if we are really separate from God, as if God is not our effect, God is not our source? So the answer that we're going to get into today actually gets somewhat esoteric, but we are going to try to explain it in as best and most down-to-earth way possible. And the bottom line to understand this is that in Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings, there's primarily two different ways by which God manifests himself and creates things and brings things into being. Those two things are what we know of as light and vessels. And at first glance, light might seem to be a lot more revelatory, like the light is on, you're revealing, you're seeing something. And that is the truth in a certain sense. But what we'll learn is that there's something very important about the vessels as well. And that specifically the creation of something from nothing, it must come about from the vessel space, from the place of vessels. So one way to understand this that I kind of came up with to just give you a very simple understanding of this is let's imagine we have two different scenarios. Let's say we have a scenario where somebody flashes a light bulb into a room, right? So in that situation, let's say you're sitting in a room and all of a sudden this light comes flashing through the room. Then you turn around and you see oh, wow, okay, where is this light coming from? You can trace that light back and you can see that the light is coming from a specific light bulb, from some specific light source. So there's a little bit more of a direct connection with light to its source. And it is very revelatory in that way, and it does connect right back to its source. As opposed to, let's say the same person, instead of shining a light bulb into the room, let's say they actually made a light bulb. Let's say they made this thing, which we call a vessel, a vessel of light. And they threw the light bulb into the room. So then you saw this light bulb and you looked at it. Now you're not looking at light anymore. You're looking at a vessel. And let's say you studied this vessel, this light bulb, for many years. You might be able to understand the mechanics of the light bulb, but it would tell you very little about the person who created the light bulb, who brought the light bulb into being, and where this light bulb really came from. It doesn't have, there's a disconnect between the light bulb and its source, which is not present between the light and the light bulb itself, right? And this is where vessels come into being. And this is really how it is that God creates things, the something from nothing, the worlds that we know, our existence, something from nothing, is specifically through these vessels. On the other hand, the thing that we really must remember, and that's really important to remember, is again, in this analogy of the light bulb does have a creator. The light bulb didn't come into creation out of nothing. Somebody did create that light bulb, make that light bulb. The person just picking up the light bulb in the room doesn't see that, isn't aware of that. And similarly here too, in the case with us and God, it's a similar kind of thing where we feel ourselves to be independent existences, something different than God, that is distinct from God. But that's actually not the case. And God did set it up in such a way that that will be our perception, but it is a false perception, and we must be aware of that truly our entire existence and our entire lives, our entire being is 100% nullified and unified with God and totally dependent upon God. So with all of that being said, let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of these ideas. And for context, we are in the middle of Epistle 20 of Iggeres HaKodesh. So the Alter Rebbe begins, and he says that while it's true that every created substance, everything, every something, is totally considered not and nothing before God, as we've spoken about many times in the Tanya. Meaning to say not only that it's considered as if not and nothing compared to God, but it's actually nullified in its source in comparison to the vitality and the light that is that flows within it. And then the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain that this vitality, this light that flows within these created beings comes specifically, getting technical here, from the vessels of the 10 spheros of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. These are the 4 primary spiritual worlds, and they each have 10 spheres within them, and each of these 10 spheres have an aspect of a light and an aspect of vessel. And so it's specifically this Yeshus, this somethingness, comes from the vessel aspect of the 10 spheres of these 4 worlds, within which is found the kav, literally translated as the line of the infinite light of God that shines within them, that radiates within them. So the discussion of the kav is a much bigger discussion for another time, but the kav is basically it means a line. It's like this measuring stick that God uses before creation to measure out all of existence. And so this is the source really of the radiance of godliness, the radiance of life that's in everything. And so this kav, this radiance is found within all things through the aspect of the vessels. The vessels can contain this life force. And the Alter Rebbe likens this to like the sun ray while it is still within the sun itself. As we spoke about before in Shar Yechud B'Amunah, right? In the second part of the Tanya, the Shar Yechud B'Amunah. So go back and listen to those episodes where we discussed this at length, where we really talked about the nature of existence and what that's all about, how everything is nullified in God, just like the sun and all of that. So, however, so now the Alter Rebbe says that, well, this is the true truth. This is the true truth that we're all nullified in the face of God, and we say that everything is considered as if not before him. The Alter Rebbe specifies here this word before him is very important, and we specifically say before him because this is before him, meaning to say from God's perspective. From God's perspective, this is how God sees things. God is like the sun, lahavdil, that perceives the light, and the light of the sun and the sun rays is totally nullified within the sun itself. However, when we talk about the knowledge that comes from below to above, then, and this is talking about like a created being who is something separate, totally separate, and it has its own understanding and comprehension down here below, right? Like that's like what we have here below. We don't experience this, right? We feel ourselves to be very real. We feel ourselves to be very different than God, very independent from God. And this is because this power, this source that we have that's within us is something that is way beyond our comprehension at all. And there's no similarity. There's no parallel between one thing to the other, not in a small way, not in a big way. It's not like the cause and effect type of thing. So just like we spoke about in the introduction, where something that has a cause and has an effect, there's a relationship between the two things, because we know that anything that's the effect of something has some understanding of its cause. Like, let's say if you're feeling a certain way, let's say you have a certain emotion and you're like, why am I feeling sad today? Why am I feeling happy? Usually, if you think about it enough, you can think about it. It usually has a cause of some way, or like, let's say if there's a bruise on your body, where did that bruise come from? It's like, if you think about it, you can figure out, oh yeah, because I banged myself, right? And I got that bruise. So there's some relationship between the cause and the effect, and the cause and the effect usually has some type of awareness of its cause, and it's nullified to it, right? Like there's a sense of subjugation to it. Like people feel this is, in a negative way, this is where people feel victims to their circumstances. They feel like that these things cause them to behave in a certain way. Or you have a bruise on your body, it was caused by you hitting your knee on a chair or whatever it is. And not only is there an awareness of a cause, like does an effect have somewhat of an awareness of its cause, it's also, and it's nullified to it, it also, there's a recognition that they're not that different. The cause and the effect actually are somewhat similar. There's something similar about them. And the Alter Rebbe says that this is definitely not the case, not in a small measure at all is this the case when we talk about this idea of created beings that were created from something from nothing. This and this is why we specifically call them yesh mi'ain, something from nothing, ex nihilo, something from nothing. What is this nothing? What do we mean by nothing? So we mean that it's something that is so beyond our comprehension. It's not, we can't call it a thing because it's so different than who we are, this nothingness, this source of our existence. And also it's an acknowledgement of the fact that it exists in such a way that is really just very different than who we are. Okay, so that's the basic idea. This is kind of like the takeaway message of today's Tanya. Now the Tanya kind of goes in a little bit more of a technical direction, which I'll try to break down to the best of my ability, though it is quite technical, as to the actual source of this power of this creation of something from nothing within God, like how, or within godliness, like how does this actually happen? Where is it? Where can we map it out? This thing that creates something from nothing. What is that all about? So the Alter Rebbe says that the beginning of the somethingness, the beginning of the created something, and like the head of it, the start of it all, is from the vessels of the 10 spheros of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, as well as the lights of the Ruach and the Nefesh. So, okay, let's break this down. So once again, there are 4 general worlds, and the 3 lower worlds are the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. Bria is like the beginning of this creation. This is where we start to see that there's something other than God, because in the world of Atzilus is the world of emanation. Everything is nullified to God. It's like the sunlight within the sun itself. So the vessels that are found within the 3 lower spheres, this is the origin of this creation of somethingness, something other than God, as well as the lights that are found within there, specifically on the levels of Nefesh and Ruach, which are the 2 lower aspects of the soul level. So it's like, so again, every world, not only does it have 10 spheres, it also has different levels of soul within it. And the 2 lower levels of soul is the Nefesh and Ruach. And now, so we say that it's the source is these vessels within these 3 worlds, as well as these 2 lower levels of souls. And these 2 things, the vessels that we're talking about, as well as the 2 levels of souls, where did they come from? They came from the level of neshama, which is a higher level of soul, of the 10 spheros in Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which is total godliness. And so where can this be traced back to? So we're going like up in a map. You might want to take notes here and see like on a map of where we're going back to. So it's like on the bottom of the totem pole here, we see that we have the vessels within the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, as well as the 2 lower levels of the soul, the Ruach and the Nefesh. And the source of those is in the neshama of the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which this neshama of the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah is total godliness. Why is it total godliness? Because the source of that is in the 30 vessels of Malchus of Atzilus. So, okay, once you hear that word Atzilus, that's when you know we're talking total godliness, nullification to the source, all of that. But even within Atzilus, there are different levels of emanations. So within Atzilus, you also have the 10 spheres. So the lowest of all the 10 spheres is Malchus, right? And just like in all the other worlds, we know that there's light and vessels. In Atzilus too, there are vessels. And within the realm of vessels, this is kind of like a side note to know, there's actually 3 aspects of vessels. I know this is very technical, but just bear with me as best as you can. So within the vessels, we have what are called the external vessels, the internal vessels, and the intermediate vessels. So each one of the spheros, each one of the 10 spheros has an aspect of light to it, and it also has an aspect of vessel, and there are 3 subcategories of vessels. So if we have 10 spheros times 3, that equals 30, which is why there are 30 vessels in total within each world. So now specifically we're honing in on the 30 vessels of Malchus, which is the lowest sphere, in the world of Atzilus, which is the highest of all worlds. And that is the source of the neshama of the lower worlds, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, which is the source of the vessels of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, as well as the 2 lower souls of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. That's what we're up to so far. Okay, so now we're in the world of Atzilus. And within the world of Atzilus, the Alter Rebbe is now going to describe what is it within the world of Atzilus that that the origin of this creation of something from nothing comes from. We see that there's actually a source within the world of Atzilus itself that this creation of something from nothing comes from. So it does all get traced back to this place. And what happens there? So in the world of Atzilus, as well as in all the worlds really, there's something called the Heichalos. This is the chambers. The chambers are this like very external level of within which the angels are found. So the angels are like this manifestation, this external manifestation of godliness that's like very, very external. It's really is like something distinct from God. And so these chambers, how do they come into being? These chambers come into being from the external aspect of the vessels of the 10 spheres. So remember we talked about how the vessels have 3 aspects. There's the internal aspect, the external aspect, and the intermediate aspect. So the external aspect of the vessels of the spheres in Atzilus create, which are total godliness, because we're in the world of Atzilus, but these create the Heichalos, the chambers within Atzilus. And within this category, within this world of, within this realm of the Heichalos, then we find vested within there the aspect of the Igulim of the 10 spheros. What's the aspect of the Igulim? This is the aspect of, Igulim means circles, so it's the aspect of the encompassing light within the 10 spheros, as well as the bodies of the angels of Atzilus, which are also an aspect of something. Like when we say angel, it's something that's not God, right? As it is written, and the Alter Rebbe here quotes a verse from, a citation from Iyov, chapter 4, verse 18, Uvemelachav yasim tahala, and his angels he charges with deficiency. So meaning to say there's something deficient about the angels. So meaning that they're not total godliness, because they are not totally in a state of nullification and a way of a cause to its an effect to its cause, like an alol in Hebrew, the effect to its cause, its ilah. So that's the end of the section. I know the end got very esoteric and technical. Again, it's something you might want to just, if you're interested, you can like read it over a few times, listen to it a few times, try to take some notes. Maybe if nothing else, maybe it will make you curious about studying more deeper chasadas. For example, the Mitchell Rebbe Shari Chud V'Amunah is a good place to start. I would say that really gets into these technicalities of the worlds and the spheros and the kelim, the external kelim, the internal kelim, the heichalos, the chambers, all of that stuff. It does get quite technical. Maybe it will give you an appreciation of just how vast this knowledge is. But the bottom line really that we want to bring out from today is the explanation as to how it is that we are able to exist or have a semblance of our own independent existence, in spite of the fact that we know that everything is really sourced in God and is really truly nullified to God and has no existence of its own other than God. So how can we feel that we do have our own independent existence, even if it's only from our perspective? Where does this come from? It must have a source within God. So today we explored that source, and we explored that that source is from the vessels, and we trace back, and specifically it's the vessels of the 3 lower worlds, and we trace those back to even the highest of all worlds, because everything comes from that higher world, that world of Atzilus, but it's within it's from the external aspect of the vessels within that world, which ultimately translate within the chambers of that world, which is a very external aspect of that world, and the angels of the world as well. So again, very technical today, but hopefully you did get at least the main message out of this, and we'll continue along these lines tomorrow, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.